Sarah Martinez had always been confident about her appearance. At 25, she worked as a marketing coordinator for a tech company in Austin, Texas, and loved spending weekends hiking with friends or trying new restaurants downtown. Her life felt perfectly normal until one rainy Thursday evening in March changed everything. She was driving home from work when a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into the passenger side of her Honda Civic. The impact sent her car spinning across the intersection before it crashed into a concrete barrier. When paramedics arrived, Sarah was unconscious and bleeding heavily from severe lacerations on the right side of her face and neck. The next few weeks became a blur of surgeries, pain medication, and worried family members hovering around her hospital bed. The doctors did their best to repair the damage, but the cuts had been deep and jagged. Despite multiple procedures and the best plastic surgery available, Sarah was left with prominent scars running from her right temple down to her collarbone. When she finally looked in a mirror 6 weeks after the accident, Sarah barely recognized herself. The scars were raised and pink, creating an intricate pattern across what had once been smooth skin. Her mother tried to reassure her that they would fade with time, but Sarah could see the shock in everyone's eyes when they first saw her. Returning to work felt like walking into a different world. Colleagues who used to chat easily with her now seemed uncomfortable, their eyes darting away from her scars or staring too long before quickly looking elsewhere. During meetings, Sarah noticed people sitting across from her would position themselves so they could see her good side. The casual friendships she had enjoyed began to feel strained and awkward. Even worse were the reactions from strangers. Children would point and whisper to their parents. Adults would stare openly or make exaggerated efforts to not look at her at all. Shopping became an ordeal of uncomfortable encounters and pitying glances. Sarah began to understand what it felt like to be defined by something completely beyond her control. Her social life crumbled quickly. Friends stopped inviting her to parties or group dinners. When she did go out, she could feel the weight of curious stares from across restaurants or bars. Dating, which had never been difficult before, became impossible. Men who approached her would visibly recoil when she turned her head and revealed the full extent of her scars. The worst part was how she began to see herself. Every morning, looking in the bathroom mirror became an exercise in self-criticism and despair. She started wearing high-necked sweaters and scarves even in the Texas heat, trying desperately to hide what felt like a mark of shame. The confident woman she had been felt like a distant memory, replaced by someone who wanted nothing more than to become invisible. Sarah's family suggested counseling, but she resisted. What could a therapist tell her that would change how people looked at her? How could talking about her feelings make the scars disappear or bring back the life she had lost? She felt trapped between the person she used to be and this new reality where her appearance seemed to be the only thing anyone could see. Sleep became difficult as she replayed every uncomfortable interaction from her day. She would lie awake thinking about how different her life might have been if she had left work just 5 minutes earlier that night or taken a different route home. The randomness of it all felt cruel and senseless. One moment of someone else's poor judgment had completely altered the trajectory of her existence. As months passed, Sarah realized she was becoming increasingly isolated. She had started working from home whenever possible and avoided social situations entirely. Her world was shrinking down to just her apartment, grocery stores during off-peak hours, and the handful of medical appointments she couldn't avoid. The vibrant, outgoing person she had been was disappearing, replaced by someone who lived in fear of other people's reactions. The scars themselves were healing physically, but the emotional wounds felt fresh every day. Sarah began to wonder if this was simply her new reality, if she would spend the rest of her life as someone people stared at, pitted, or tried to avoid looking at altogether. The future that had once seemed full of possibilities now felt limited and lonely. Friends and family kept telling her that her appearance didn't matter, that people would see past the scars to who she really was inside. But Their reassurances felt hollow when every day brought new evidence that the world saw her differently now. Sarah was beginning to accept that some changes in life are permanent, and learning to live with them might be harder than she ever imagined. Almost a year after the accident, Sarah found herself sitting in her apartment on a Saturday afternoon, scrolling through social media and watching her former life play out without her. Friends were getting married, traveling to exotic places, and sharing photos from parties she was no longer invited to. The isolation had become so complete that she sometimes went days without speaking to another person. That evening, while channel surfing to distract herself from another lonely weekend, Sarah stumbled across a documentary about tattoo artists who specialized in covering scars. The show featured people with burn injuries, surgical scars, and accident-related disfigurements who had transformed their trauma into beautiful art. As she watched person after person reveal stunning tattoos that incorporated their scars into meaningful designs, something shifted inside her. One woman in the documentary had been in a house fire and lost most of the skin on her arms. Instead of hiding the scars, she had worked with an artist to create an elaborate phoenix rising from flames that flowed seamlessly over the damaged areas. The woman spoke about reclaiming her body and her story, about choosing how people would see her rather than letting her scars define her. For the first time in months, Sarah felt a spark of hope. She began researching tattoo artists who specialized in scar coverage, staying up late reading testimonials, and studying before and after photos. The idea of transforming her scars into something beautiful and intentional felt revolutionary. Instead of marks that reminded everyone of her trauma, she could have art that told a story of survival and strength. Finding the right artist took weeks of careful research. Sarah wanted someone who understood both the technical challenges of tattooing over scar tissue and the emotional significance of the work. She eventually discovered Marcus Chun, a tattoo artist in San Antonio who had built his reputation specifically on transformational scar work. His portfolio showed incredible designs that didn't just cover scars, but celebrated them as part of the overall artistic composition. The consultation with Marcus was the first time in months that Sarah felt truly heard. He spent over an hour examining her scars, discussing her story, and understanding what she hoped to achieve. Marcus explained that tattooing over scar tissue was more complex than regular tattoos. The skin held ink differently, and the process required multiple sessions, but he was confident they could create something beautiful. Together, they developed a design that would transform Sarah's scars into a flowing botanical pattern featuring cherry blossoms and delicate vines. The design would extend from her temple down to her collarbone, incorporating the scar tissue as natural variations in the flower petals and branch textures. Marcus explained that cherry blossoms symbolized renewal and the fleeting nature of life, making them perfect for someone reclaiming their story after trauma. The first tattooing session was both painful and liberating. As Marcus worked, carefully outlining the design over her scarred skin, Sarah felt like she was taking control of her narrative for the first time since the accident. The pain was intense. Scar tissue is more sensitive than normal skin, but it felt purposeful rather than senseless like the original injury had been. Between sessions, Sarah noticed subtle changes in how she moved through the world. The partially completed tattoo made her feel less like she was hiding something shameful and more like she was in the process of creating something meaningful. When people stared now, she found herself thinking about the finished design rather than feeling embarrassed about her appearance. The tattooing process took 4 months to complete, with sessions spaced weeks apart to allow proper healing. During this time, Sarah began venturing out more frequently. She started shopping during busier hours and even accepted an invitation to her cousin's birthday party. The reactions from people were still noticeable, but they felt different somehow. Instead of looks of pity or discomfort, she caught people trying to get a better look at the intricate artwork emerging on her skin. As the tattoo neared completion, Sarah realized she was becoming excited about her appearance for the first time since the accident. She found herself standing longer in front of mirrors, admiring the way the delicate flowers seemed to bloom across her skin. The scars were still there, but they had become part of something beautiful rather than reminders of trauma. The final session was emotional for both Sarah and Marcus. As he added the last details to the smallest cherry blossoms, Sarah looked in the mirror and saw a person she recognized again. Not the woman she had been before the accident, but someone new who had emerged from that experience. The tattoo was stunning, transforming what had been a source of shame into a masterpiece that told a story of resilience. Marcus took photos for his portfolio and, with Sarah's permission, shared her story on social media. The response was overwhelming. People from around the world commented with their own stories of overcoming trauma and transforming scars. Sarah realized she had become part of a community she never knew existed. People who had chosen to wear their survival stories as art. For the first time in over a year, Sarah felt proud of her reflection. The cherry blossoms cascading down her neck and face were beautiful and meaningful, representing not just artistic skill, but personal triumph. She had transformed from a victim hiding from the world into someone who had taken control of her story and made it beautiful. The tattoo was complete, but Sarah sensed this was just the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She had learned that healing sometimes meant accepting change rather than trying to return to how things used to be. The scars that had once felt like a prison had become the foundation for something extraordinary. With her tattoo complete, Sarah began to experience a confidence she hadn't felt since before the accident. The cherry blossom design had transformed not just her appearance, but her entire relationship with her reflection. Instead of rushing past mirrors, she found herself pausing to admire the intricate artwork that now adorned her skin. The scars were still visible, but they had become part of something beautiful rather than reminders of trauma. Her return to normal social activities happened gradually. Sarah started with small steps, longer grocery shopping trips, coffee runs during busy afternoon hours, and eventually accepting lunch invitations from coworkers who had remained supportive throughout her difficult year. People's reactions were markedly different now. Instead of awkward glances or pitying stares, she noticed genuine admiration for the artistic work covering her scars. The tattoo became a conversation starter in ways Sarah had never expected. Strangers would approach her to compliment the beautiful design, ask about the artist, or share their own stories about meaningful tattoos. These interactions felt completely different from the uncomfortable staring she had endured before. Now people were seeing art, skill, and personal choice rather than just the aftermath of an accident. Sarah's confidence grew with each positive interaction. She began wearing clothes that showed off the tattoo rather than hiding it, choosing scoop-neck tops and dresses that displayed the cherry blossoms cascading down her neck. For the first time in over a year, she felt proud of her appearance and excited about getting dressed each morning. Work relationships improved dramatically as colleagues became comfortable engaging with her again. The tattoo seemed to give people permission to look directly at her without feeling awkward, and conversations flowed more naturally. Sarah realized that much of the social discomfort she had experienced wasn't necessarily about the scars themselves, but about people not knowing how to react to visible trauma. The tattoo had reframed her story in a way that felt approachable and inspiring rather than tragic. Dating, which had seemed impossible before, slowly became a possibility again. The tattoo attracted attention from people who appreciated art and individuality rather than conventional beauty standards. Sarah met David, a graphic designer, at a coffee shop where he had approached her specifically to compliment the cherry blossom design. Their conversation flowed easily as they discussed art, personal expression, and the stories behind people's tattoos. As their relationship developed, Sarah found herself opening up about the accident and its aftermath in ways she hadn't been able to before. The tattoo had given her a way to control her narrative. She could choose when and how to share the story behind the artwork. David was fascinated by her transformation and admired her courage in turning trauma into something beautiful. Sarah also began volunteering with a local support group for accident survivors. Many of the people she met were struggling with visible scars and the social challenges that came with them. She found herself sharing not just her practical experience with scar-covering tattoos, but, more importantly, her journey towards self-acceptance and empowerment. Helping others navigate similar challenges gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't expected. The support group introduced Sarah to other people who had found creative ways to reclaim their bodies after trauma. She met burn survivors who had incorporated their scars into stunning artistic designs, amputees who had turned their prosthetics into canvases for expression, and people with medical scars who had transformed them into meaningful symbols. This community showed her that she wasn't alone in her journey and that there were many paths to healing. Through her volunteer work, Sarah began speaking at hospitals and rehabilitation centers, sharing her story with recent accident victims who were struggling with visible injuries. These presentations were emotionally challenging, but incredibly rewarding. She could see hope returning to people's faces as she showed them her tattoo and talked about reclaiming control over their appearance and their story. The speaking engagements led to media attention, including local newspaper articles and television interviews about her transformation. Sarah found herself becoming a spokesperson for the idea that scars didn't have to be hidden or shameful. The media coverage brought her into contact with other people across the country who were dealing with similar challenges, creating a network of support that extended far beyond her local community. One particularly meaningful connection came through social media, where Sarah's story had been shared widely. She received a message from Elena, a young woman in Seattle who had been in a motorcycle accident and was struggling with facial scarring. Elena had seen Sarah's story and was considering a cover-up tattoo, but felt scared and unsure. Their correspondence over several months helped Elena work through her fears and eventually get her own transformational tattoo. The ripple effects of Sarah's transformation extended into unexpected areas of her life. Her confidence boost affected her work performance, leading to a promotion she had been overlooking herself for before the accident. She began taking on challenging projects and speaking up in meetings, no longer worried about drawing attention to herself. The professional success felt like reclaiming another piece of her pre-accident identity. Sarah also rediscovered her love for outdoor activities that she had abandoned after the accident. She started hiking again, joined a rock climbing gym, and even signed up for a pottery class she had always wanted to try. The tattoo had given her back the comfort of being seen in public, which opened up possibilities she had forgotten existed. Most importantly, Sarah realized that her relationship with herself had fundamentally changed. The woman looking back at her in the mirror was stronger and more resilient than the person she had been before the accident. The cherry blossoms on her skin told a story of survival, creativity, and choice that she was proud to wear. She had learned that healing didn't always mean returning to how things were before, but sometimes meant growing into someone even better. 2 years after completing her tattoo, Sarah had built a fulfilling new life around advocacy and community support. She was preparing for another speaking engagement at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Austin when her life took another unexpected turn. The presentation was part of a program designed to help wounded veterans cope with visible injuries, and Sarah felt honored to share her story with people who had sacrificed so much for their country. As she set up her presentation materials in the hospital conference room, Sarah noticed a man in his early 30s sitting in the back corner. Staff Sergeant Michael Rodriguez had burns covering the left side of his face and neck from an IED explosion in Afghanistan 3 years earlier. Unlike the other attendees who had gathered in small groups, Michael sat alone, his scarred side turned away from the room. During her presentation, Sarah noticed Michael paying close attention, but remaining completely silent while others asked questions and shared their experiences. His body language suggested someone who was still struggling with acceptance of his injuries, despite the years that had passed since his trauma. When the formal presentation ended, most attendees approached Sarah to thank her and ask for advice, but Michael remained in his seat, clearly wanting to leave but seeming unable to move. Sarah approached him carefully, introducing herself and thanking him for his service. Michael was polite but distant, explaining that his counselor had required him to attend the session. He admitted that he hadn't found much value in support groups or therapy sessions, feeling that civilians couldn't understand what he had been through. The conversation was brief, but Sarah sensed a deep pain that went beyond physical scars. As Michael finally stood to leave, Sarah's cherry blossom tattoo caught his attention for the first time. His entire demeanor changed as he stared at the intricate design flowing across her neck and face. After a long moment of silence, he asked quietly if he could get a closer look. Sarah was accustomed to people admiring her tattoo, but Michael's reaction was different, more intense and personal than the usual artistic appreciation. Michael studied the tattoo carefully, paying particular attention to how the cherry blossoms were integrated with the scar tissue underneath. Finally, he looked up at Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. He asked if he could show her something, then carefully rolled up the sleeve on his right arm. Sarah gasped as she saw an identical cherry blossom branch tattooed along his forearm, done in the same delicate style as her own design. The coincidence seemed impossible. Michael explained that he had gotten his tattoo 2 years earlier from an artist in San Antonio, the same Marcus Chun who had created Sarah's transformation. He had seen Sarah's story on Marcus's social media and been inspired to get his own cherry blossom tattoo, though he had chosen to place it on his arm rather than over his facial scars. The design had given him hope during his darkest period of recovery. Sarah was stunned by the connection. Here was someone who had been following her journey from afar, someone who had found inspiration in her transformation, but was still struggling with his own healing process. They sat back down and began talking about their experiences with Marcus, their similar design choices, and the meaning behind cherry blossoms for people who had survived trauma. Michael opened up in ways his counselors had been trying to achieve for months. He talked about the isolation he felt as a veteran with visible injuries, how different civilian life was from the military brotherhood he missed, and how he struggled with feeling like a burden to his family. The facial burns made him feel like a stranger in his own life. And unlike Sarah, he hadn't been able to take the step of tattooing over his scars. As their conversation continued, Sarah learned that Michael had been following her advocacy work and social media posts for over a year. Her journey had given him hope that healing was possible, but he hadn't found the courage to reach out or take action on his own transformation. The random encounter at the VA hospital felt like fate bringing them together at the right moment. Sarah shared the challenges she had faced during her own healing process, emphasizing that confidence hadn't come immediately even after getting the tattoo. She talked about the gradual process of rebuilding her life and how connecting with other survivors had been crucial to her recovery. Michael listened intently, asking questions about practical aspects of the tattooing process and the emotional work that had to accompany the physical transformation. The conversation revealed that Michael had been considering a cover-up tattoo for months, but kept finding excuses to postpone making the appointment with Marcus. Fear of additional pain, uncertainty about design choices, and worry about how his family would react had kept him stuck in indecision. Sarah understood these fears completely and shared how she had worked through similar concerns. Michael admitted that seeing Sarah in person made the transformation feel more real and achievable. Her confidence and the beautiful integration of the tattoo with her scars showed him what was possible. He had been inspired by her online presence, but meeting face-to-face proved that the healing she portrayed was genuine and sustainable. By the end of their conversation, Michael had made a decision. He asked Sarah if she would consider accompanying him to a consultation with Marcus. The idea of having someone who understood his experience present during the planning process felt like exactly the support he needed. Sarah agreed immediately, honored to help someone who had found inspiration in her journey. They exchanged contact information and made plans to visit Marcus's studio together the following week. For Michael, this felt like the first step forward he had taken in months. For Sarah, meeting someone who had been secretly following her journey was a powerful reminder of how far-reaching the effects of sharing her story had become. As they parted ways at the hospital parking lot, both felt a sense of connection they hadn't experienced in years. Michael had found someone who truly understood his struggle and could guide him toward transformation. Sarah had met someone whose healing journey was intertwined with her own in ways she never could have imagined. The encounter left Sarah reflecting on the unexpected ways people's lives intersect. Her decision to share her story publicly had reached someone who desperately needed hope, and now they had the opportunity to support each other through continued healing. The matching cherry blossom tattoos felt like a symbol of the connection that could exist between survivors, even when they didn't know each other existed. The following Tuesday, Sarah met Michael at Marcus Chen's tattoo studio in San Antonio. Michael was visibly nervous, arriving 20 minutes early and pacing in the parking lot until Sarah pulled up. She could see the internal struggle playing out on his face, the desire for transformation battling against years of hiding and self-protection. Sarah remembered feeling exactly the same way before her first consultation. Marcus greeted them warmly, recognizing Sarah immediately and expressing excitement about meeting Michael, whose story he had heard through Sarah's advocacy work. The artist's genuine enthusiasm and professional demeanor helped ease Michael's tension as they settled into the consultation room. Marcus had prepared by reviewing photos of Michael's burns and sketching preliminary ideas for incorporating the scars into an expanded cherry blossom design. During the consultation, Michael's transformation began before any tattoo needle touched his skin. As Marcus examined the burn scars covering the left side of his face and neck, he spoke about the unique texture and coloration patterns that could be incorporated into the artistic design. Instead of flaws to be hidden, Marcus presented the scars as opportunities to create depth and character in the artwork. The proposed design would extend Michael's existing arm tattoo up across his shoulder, neck, and face, creating a cohesive sleeve that told a complete story. The cherry blossoms would appear to be growing from the branch on his arm, spreading across the scarred area in a natural, organic flow. Marcus explained how the varying skin texture from the burns would actually enhance certain elements of the design, making the petals appear more three-dimensional. Sarah watched Michael's face change as he studied the sketches and listened to Marcus's vision. For the first time since she had met him, he seemed to see possibility rather than limitation when looking at his reflection in the studio mirrors. The artistic interpretation of his scars as integral parts of a beautiful design was exactly the perspective shift he needed. The tattooing process took 6 months to complete, with Sarah accompanying Michael to most of his appointments. Their friendship deepened during the long sessions, as they shared stories about their trauma, recovery, and dreams for the future. Michael talked about his military service, the brotherhood he missed, and his struggles with civilian life. Sarah shared her ongoing advocacy work and the unexpected joy she had found in helping other survivors. Between tattoo sessions, Michael began making other positive changes in his life. Inspired by Sarah's confidence, he started attending social events he had been avoiding and even began dating again. The partially completed tattoo gave him talking points with new people and helped shift conversations away from pity toward admiration for his artistic choices and personal strength. Sarah also found herself growing through the experience of supporting Michael's transformation. Helping someone else navigate the healing process deepened her understanding of her own journey and reinforced her commitment to advocacy work. She realized that her story had evolved from personal recovery to community building, creating connections between survivors who might otherwise have felt alone. When Michael's tattoo was finally complete, the transformation was stunning. The cherry blossoms flowed seamlessly from his arm across his neck and face, incorporating the burn scars into the natural variation of bark texture and petal shading. The design was sophisticated and beautiful, telling a story of growth and renewal that honored both his military service and his survival. Marcus organized a small celebration at the studio when the final session was complete, inviting other clients who had undergone similar transformations. The gathering became an impromptu support group meeting, with people sharing their stories and marveling at the artistic work that had helped them reclaim their bodies and their confidence. Sarah and Michael found themselves at the center of a community they had helped create. The media attention around Michael's transformation brought renewed focus to Sarah's advocacy work. Local news stations featured both of their stories, highlighting the power of peer support in trauma recovery and the growing movement of people choosing to transform scars into art. The coverage reached veterans across the country who were dealing with similar challenges, creating a network of support that extended far beyond Austin. Sarah and Michael began speaking together at veterans' hospitals and trauma recovery centers, their matching tattoos serving as visual proof that healing was possible and that survivors didn't have to navigate their journeys alone. Michael's military perspective combined with Sarah's civilian experience provided a comprehensive approach to discussing trauma recovery and self-acceptance. Their partnership evolved into a formal nonprofit organization dedicated to connecting trauma survivors with resources for both emotional healing and practical scar transformation options. They worked with tattoo artists, counselors, and medical professionals to create comprehensive support programs that addressed both the physical and psychological aspects of visible trauma recovery. 3 years after their first meeting, Sarah and Michael had helped over 200 people begin their own transformation journeys. Their organization had expanded to include support groups, mentorship programs, and financial assistance for people who couldn't afford professional tattoo work. The impact of their chance encounter at the VA hospital had rippled out to affect countless lives. For Sarah, meeting Michael had shown her that her personal healing journey was just the beginning of a larger purpose. The shame she had once felt about her scars had been completely transformed into pride in the community she had helped build. Her cherry blossom tattoo was no longer just personal art, but a symbol of the connections possible between survivors. Michael's transformation was equally profound. The isolated veteran who had hidden from the world had become a confident advocate who traveled the country sharing his story. His facial tattoo drew attention everywhere he went, but now that attention led to conversations about resilience, art, and the power of choosing how to tell your own story. Their friendship had become the foundation for both of their continued healing. They understood each other's struggles in ways that family and friends, despite their love and support, simply couldn't. The matching cherry blossom tattoos that had brought them together served as permanent reminders that no one had to face trauma recovery alone. Looking back, both Sarah and Michael could see how their chance meeting had been the perfect moment for both of them. Sarah had been ready to share her knowledge and support someone else's journey, while Michael had finally reached the point where he could accept help and take action toward healing. Their story proved that sometimes the most powerful medicine for trauma is finding someone else who truly understands your experience and choosing to heal together.